Welcome back to the Jiu Jitsu Oracle, where we're going to tell you everything we know about CJI and ADCC as they stand. I'm Ross. I'm joined, as always, by Calum, and we've had the rules released for the Craig Jones Invitational. We're all waiting to find out how the matches were going to be scored, how long they were going to be, etc. So, Calum, before I come to you for your thoughts, I just want to set out the main parameters for the matches. So the matches pre-finals are going to be 3 5-minute rounds with a 1-minute rest in between. The finals are 5 rounds of 5 minutes plus a 5-minute overtime if the points are level after 5 rounds. And the judges' scoring is going to be on a 10-point must system, which is going to be open scoring, so the competitors will know where they stand during the match. So, what do you think about all that for starters, Calum?
So, the round system, I find quite interesting, and I'm quite excited for, just because I quite enjoy the matches from ACB in the past, and then AIGA more recently, which is the two organizations that I know of that have used that system in Jiu-Jitsu. I think that's made for quite exciting matches, quite fast-paced matches. I know you've got a slightly different perspective, which I also understand, that in Jiu-Jitsu, like, it's a lot about breaking down people's energies and like getting to good positions and kind of utilizing that, which might not be something people can do if they get to their position at like 3 minutes 50 into the round and then they get stood up and reset. So there's definitely two sides to that. Do you want to share your opinion on that specifically?
I think grapplers need time to work, and it's going to be a shame if things are starting to happen in the match and then a round ends and then it's reset on the feet. If they were going to do rounds, and Craig Jones Invitational's heavily influenced by MMA with the round lengths they're using and the scoring system they're using, then I'd have liked to have seen the old Pride round system used, where there was 1 10-minute round and then a 5-minute round thereafter. I think people need some time to work. It's going to be a shame if there's action on the feet and then it eventually gets to the ground and then the round ends, because that's what we want to see. We want to see action on the ground. That's why we watch submission grappling. So I do think you need to give grapplers time to work, and I do wonder how the rule set, the rounds are going to influence that. I would also say we'll get more into the scoring for CJI and how it's heavily influenced by them wanting action initiated. But I would just say, if you want loads of action, then you've got to do shorter rounds. So that's why college wrestling's 3 2-minute rounds, because like they want a high pace with loads of action. So I think this might fall in between the two, where sometimes in Jiu-Jitsu we see matches that are 10, 15-minute super fights and guys get a chance to work. Wrestling, you get much shorter matches, 3 by 2 minutes, and it's like they're wanting fast-paced action, action, action. This sounds like it falls in the middle, which I'm not sure about.
Yeah, I think like it definitely will favour a certain style of grappling, but then we've got other rule sets out there that favour the complete opposite style, with Gordon calling for like half-an-hour matches, etc. And we've got, like I said, with ACB and AIGA, but we've also got like the Abu Dhabi gi competitions. I think they're like 6 minutes for a black belt, so they tend to be quite fast-paced. So it's not a bad thing necessarily that there's like this different rule set offering different things and different advantages to different styles, but it's definitely going to play a big factor. I like the fact that like we've got 5 minutes, and then that's not the match over, so there will be another 5 minutes after that, and then so on and so on. So I'm quite looking forward to it, but I can definitely see the potential drawbacks of that.
Unless there's a submission, for then the submission ends the match.
Yeah.
So the scoring system, 10-point must scoring system. This sounds a little bit strange to me, because the MMA 10-point must scoring system is essentially borrowed from boxing, and I don't even think it's the best scoring system for MMA. I think a better scoring system was in Pride, where the whole match was scored as one, and then a winner was decided. But they're going after the UFC style of scoring. What do you think about the 10-point must system being used?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of it. I've said for a while, even in MMA, like, why not use 100-point system? Because I see all too often someone will win the first 2 rounds and you can barely even tell the difference, and you kind of have to give the round to someone. So say fighter A wins those first 2 rounds, and then fighter B like beats the crap out of the guy in round 3, but not quite enough to justify a 10-8, and then fighter A still wins the fight because he's scraped by in those 2 rounds. So I think like in 100-point system, just as an example, or there could be other ways of doing it, but there's a bit more nuance in how you can score the rounds. It's not quite so much as a blunt instrument as the 10-point system, in my opinion.
Yeah, I just think you could use more numbers in the 10-point must system. Like, it doesn't, all the rounds don't have to be 10-9 or 10-8. We could see a 10-7, a 10-6. So I do think there has to be improvements in MMA scoring, even before we get into like using this system for jiu-jitsu. On the one hand, like, there's the argument that they're using this because that's what people who watch combat sports are familiar with, right? So they're trying to attract MMA fans. But I think this event is so niche that it's just going to be jiu-jitsu fans who are going to be watching it.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
for the first one, on you go.
I was just going to say, we'll get on to like the specific criteria for judging as well, but like when it comes into certain nuanced things, it's like how will being on someone's back for 30 seconds stack up to passing someone's guard or taking someone down. Like, we don't really have specifics for that. We'll get on to the judging in a second, but like specific positions, like in MMA, you've got like, oh, if the fight was nearly stopped, that's probably going to be like a 10-8, for example. And you might have that in submissions, close submission attempts, but I just think it's a bit messy for doing such a big event first time around, given there's so many question marks about like how things are going to be judged in that regard.
Yeah. Now, open scoring, we're used to that in jiu-jitsu, being able to see the score. So I think that's a good thing. Agreed?
Yeah.
Good. Also, I believe the scoring is administered by the referee rather than the judges, which I think is a better way of going about it. I do find that in ADCC, the score just changing sometimes unexpectedly by the judges say so to be not the best. So I do like it in IBJJF when the points are awarded, it should be plain to see like the points getting awarded and who they go to. I think sometimes in ADCC we've seen some matches where guys aren't even aware that the points have changed, and then they're trying to scramble to make up a deficit or whatever. So I do think the open scoring is a good idea for jiu-jitsu.
If that's going to be done by the referee, how is that going to be like demonstrated at the end of the round? Is he just going to like say 10-8 to this guy, or do we know?
Well, this is the thing. We've still got questions, and I would just hope on all these questions that we're raising that there's extensive testing going on of this system. But I think, like you said, it's probably wise to borrow another rule set for the first one that's tried and tested, and then over time develop your own scoring system that you think's more optimal.
Yeah.
So the judging, from what I'm aware, the highest reward is for initiating action. Then it's close subs or dynamic action. And then lastly, it's positional control that's going to decide who wins the round. So what do you think about that as a criteria?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that at all. I think that's all a bit backwards. I think close submissions and controlling the match should be number one. That's like demonstrating good jiu-jitsu. That's demonstrating you're winning the match. The initiating action and dynamic action is good for an entertainment standpoint for certain people that like to see that in a match, but I really don't understand how that tells us who's won the match and who's the better grappler out of the two. Like, when I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking, like, say we're on the feet, grappler A is being like very aggressive, he's shooting in on shots, and then he shoots in on a double leg, and then he gets like butterfly swept into mount. So he's initiated that action, and then he just gets controlled in mount for the rest of the match, because initiating action scores higher, much higher than control in the match. Does the fighter that ends up in bottom mount for the whole round win that round just because he initiated that action? Like there might be some more nuance to this that they've not put out yet, but that just sounds a bit ridiculous to me.
Okay. Now, penalties are going to come off the round score, which I think is an interesting variation. So in Jiu-Jitsu, if you're penalised, your first penalty in IBJJF rules usually isn't a deciding factor. And thereafter, an advantage gets awarded to your opponent, and then 2 points, and then like a DQ. But this, if a round's like close, 10-9, and then someone's penalised, it becomes 9-9 or 10-8, that's a big factor in the match. So I do think it's interesting that it'll come off the round score, and that should promote active grappling, because I don't think anyone really wants to concede a penalty point.
Yeah, like these things are to promote like action and promote like fan-friendly action and like people enjoying watching the matches. But the more I think about it, the more I see organizations like aggressively enforce stalling calls and penalties. The more I think about that, I actually get more annoyed about that, I think, than not. Thinking about like ADCC, like what we saw with Mark McQueen at the trials, getting warnings and penalties, what we saw with Kynan and Craig Jones. I see it on like the UFC Fight Pass all the time. The refs getting more involved in the action than they should, in my opinion, and not like letting things progress. So I see myself getting a bit annoyed by that, just like with how they're framing this. I feel like obviously you need to call stalling in certain times, but I think it's getting to the point in some organizations where it's getting a bit too much and they just need to leave the match alone a little bit and stop getting so involved. What do you think about that?
I think that it really requires like skilled referees to understand what stalling is and what it isn't.
Yeah, and I think like a lot of referees will almost be biased within a certain style. Like if a certain style maybe is a bit slower and like taking their time in a position, they're just like, oh, you're stalling penalty, and it's just like, no, that's just how that person grapples, and it's still effective grappling even though it's not fan friendly. I don't think you should be putting action above just like who is the best grappler. We're trying to see who the best grappler in the world is in this competition. So
I agree. It goes back to that term I used right at the start of the podcast. Grapplers need time to work. So if you need that time to complete a body lock pass, then you deserve to have that time to complete your body lock pass, if you're there. But I find an interesting factor on stalling in this is that stalling can be called from anywhere. So not only can someone be called for stalling in mount top, but someone could be called for stalling in mount bottom. So they're very strict on the stalling by the sound of it. But I think there are certain positions in Jiu-Jitsu where it's not up to you anymore to progress the action. Like if you're on my back or in mount, then you're top of the mountain, so you deserve to stay there however you want. It's up to me to get out. It's like in MMA. If you get to that places on me in MMA, I can't be looking at the ref expecting a stand-up. Like, I've got to work to get up there. So, yeah, I do think that it's, again, it's falling in that, like, if you want just, like, a cat fight, do a 2-minute round and just say there has to be constant action. But that's different to the submission grappling game that we know and want to see. That is ADCC or CJI. It's that bit. If they're really pushing action but not giving guys time to work, I do disagree with that. Right, here's an interesting stalling situation that you were querying when we were having a little pre-chat. So I believe if someone pulls guard, lies back on the mat for 3 seconds, goes supine in modern jiu-jitsu parlance, with no connection to the opponent, then they get penalised. So you have some questions about this, don't you?
Yeah, so we had some different perspectives slightly on this. So in most rule sets, which I agree with, if someone's lying on their back and then there's no engagement, for me, that is the fault of the top player. We're doing jiu-jitsu, we're not doing wrestling. You can't just stand back and wave them to their feet. You've signed up for a jiu-jitsu or a grappling competition, so if someone's lying flat on their back, why are you not walking forward into their guard or trying to pass around their guard and engage in the action? It sounds like the penalty would be given for potentially both people, which I think you've got a perspective on that might be a good thing. But for me, if someone's lying flat on their back, and you're standing, what is stopping you using your legs to walk forward and engage in the match?
Yeah, for me, the question then is what's stopping the bottom player sitting up and then butt scooting forward, or standing up and wrestling and then re-pulling guard. So I think it's incumbent on both guys to make connection and make the match happen. But if you change the position of the match and I don't react to it, then you could say that's my fault. But also, like, if you change the position of the match and I don't want to go to the ground, I want to keep it wrestling, but you've decided to sit down with no connection, then I would say that's on you. Like, you've got a responsibility to get me down either with wrestling or by pulling guard in a way that engages me. So I think it's incumbent on both guys to make it happen. But I think they're trying to stop just like a lazy guard pull and just like lying on your back. I get the visual of that's not great either, especially for like people who don't really understand grappling, and they're trying to target with like MMA scoring and stuff like that. So I could see that putting off people who are checking out CJI on YouTube for the first time. But yeah, I just think it's up to both people to make the dance happen. But
I wonder as well with signing these high-level wrestlers how much they're looking to tap into that market as well, because amateur wrestling is quite a big thing in America, and obviously they've signed a few big names from that world, so they're potentially looking to maybe add in some rules that'll be a bit more friendly to those guys and encourage some of the wrestlers to come along and watch this as well.
Okay, so if you're called for stall and you're stood back up on your feet, we're back on the feet. The rounds end, we start back on the feet. So I think there is going to be a push for wrestling action.
Yeah.
The issue then is we've watched a lot of submission grappling events with a lot of time spent on the feet where not much is happening. So if it's just heavy collar ties, then I think that's going to turn people off. So definitely going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out. I think I said this before, but yeah, I just really hope that it's being tested and they're arriving at a rule set that they know is going to create exciting action. So let us know your thoughts on the CJI rules. Maybe you've checked them out before you listen to our thoughts on it, or maybe you're just learning about them along the way. But the comment sections on our more recent videos have been interesting to look at, and we try and reply to all the comments that come along. So let us know what you think. Now, there are a couple of interesting match situations with CJI as well. So while we're on that event, first off, no super fight for Mikey Musumeci, which I know is incredibly disappointing for you, Calum.
Yeah, I was looking forward to that, and as well, you'd spoke about this a couple of times, how he'd alluded, or Craig Jones had alluded on the Joe Rogan podcast to there being like a big name and a former grappling legend signing up, and you'd said, well, now if they don't get that guy, that's going to look pretty bad because they've made all this build up, and I think that's very much true. And from them, I would still be looking to get some sort of other big super fight, because they've got the one with Ffion and Mackenzie. That's great. That's like probably the biggest female super fight ever. And then they've got the one with Craig and Gabby, which is just like a bit of fun, a bit of a freak show. I don't think anyone's actually interested in watching that other than just like the weird spectacle of it. So I think there's still room for like one big super fight with some big names, and I think there's plenty of room for people, whether that's like former grappling legends or even like two MMA fighters, something like Bo Nickel versus Hamzat Chimaev, just as like an example. Something like that would be absolutely massive from like a name value perspective, or like an MMA guy versus a big grappler, something like that. I think there's still room to be filled in that area, and I think they should still be looking for a big name, even though that one that they were looking at has fallen through. We were thinking it was maybe going to be like Mikey versus Haifa, which would have been amazing, but I still think they should try fill that slot in that card.
I think another reason they should try and fill the slot on that card is because it looks like they've still got a lot of tickets to shift.
Yeah.
And the number one draw for any event is superstars and name value. So if they want to shift the tickets, I think what is going to be very important is getting some names, some big draws, because what doesn't shift tickets historically and isn't a huge deciding factor is perceived quality of match, how exciting the matches are going to be. So I'm a big pro wrestling fan, and over the years we've seen plenty of evidence that just because a wrestling promotion puts on a card with loads and loads of exciting matches, if they don't have superstars to shift the tickets, then not a lot of people are going to show up or tune in. So I do think that they need to do a bit on that. I've seen a bit more activity on social media with competitors trying to shift tickets, try to promote the event. And I would say if, like, as far as I'm aware, ticket money is going to charity. So, yeah, hopefully they can shift some more tickets and get some more money for charity. That'd be nice. Another super fight that you mentioned, Mackenzie Dern. I did not know until very, very recently that she has a fight booked with the UFC for August the 3rd, which is 2 weekends before this event. Now, that is very risky, where even if she wins, I would say there's a chance she could get a medical suspension, which makes her participation in this event questionable. So, August the 3rd, she's up against Lupi Godinez in the UFC. So, yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, even like getting injured or getting medically suspended from the fight is a big thing, and then how difficult these MMA training camps are and how hard you have to push yourself in these camps. The risk of getting injuries or illnesses, even within the camp leading up to that, are pretty high as well. So, yeah, your now biggest super fight is also in a bit of a precarious situation, just given the fact that, yeah, the odds of Mackenzie getting injured from her camp or the match or suspended in some way because of damage she's taken in the fight is pretty high, I think.
So fingers crossed that Mackenzie comes through unscathed and we get that match, which is probably the biggest match in women's grappling history. It would be brilliant to see, and it would be brilliant for Ffion to get that match. But yeah, bit of a risk there. But I just wonder with the UFC whether they've said, well, you can take this grappling match like after your fight because we know you won't be booked on anything else for a little bit of time. Because like getting a name like Mackenzie is difficult with her schedule, so maybe it's only possible like quickly post a fight for her to do it. But yeah, hopefully she pulls through. Now, there's been a couple of questions on CJI that have come in via Instagram, but we'll leave that till the end. I just want to quickly run through ADCC as it stands, because I believe that every division is now locked in with 16 competitors in every male division and 8 competitors in the 3 female divisions. So, Cal, what we'll do is we'll quickly run through the division and just giving me your general overall thoughts on the division as it stands, like what you think of the star power or how excited you are for each one. So 66, which we've done our tier list on, what do you think about that?
I think it was the clear best division in ADCC. 77 was looking a bit ropey for a while. Now I think that's a bit closer between the two, but I still think it's the best division. In ADCC, probably not from a star power perspective, just given there's bigger names in some of the other divisions, but just as like a grappling fan, I think there's some of the best talent in that division.
But I would say on the star power, like of the guys that size, they've got the big names. Now I know that's influenced by the fact that the lower weight class in CJI is under 80, so none of these guys at under 66 have jumped into that.
I still think 77's got bigger names, to be fair.
Yes, but of the smaller grapplers, shall we say, of the lighter weight grapplers, I think ADCC like has the big names, other than Mikey Musumeci, who's now not doing a super fight at CJI. So I think it looks like a good division from that perspective. Now, 77, give me your thoughts on that. So you're interested in this one?
Yeah, I think it was looking a bit ropey, a bit underwhelming for a while when it was like 12, 13 people. Obviously, there was a mass exodus from this division over to the under 80, given that the fact that they're so similar in weight, that's not a surprise. But yeah, we've got Mika Govau, who's the biggest name in the division, got JT Torres, we've got Gary Tonin, got Wagner Hocha, Matej Szczynski, Davio Amos, so some pretty big names in this division, Dante Leon, and some really good grapplers, some good variety in styles, so I'm actually really looking forward to this division now. I wasn't really too hot on it a few weeks ago, but I think how it's filled out, it's looking pretty good.
A tier list will be incoming for that as well. Mateusz Szczucinski, I would say one of, if not the biggest free agent signing. He could have gone to CJI. He didn't qualify for ADCC, didn't win the European trials, so he was up for grabs, and ADCC's managed to get him. And I think his name in the division certainly adds a lot to it. 88, we've just done our tier list on it. I think this is an exciting division because it's got some good names at the very, very top, but it's got a heavy, heavy section of disruptors that could cause some excitement. What do you think?
Yeah, I think what makes it exciting is it's like quite wide open. Obviously, Gordon's not competing, but when he does, it's almost like a foregone conclusion. Some of the divisions he does, which you're obviously excited to see Gordon compete, but from a perspective of who's going to win this division is not really that exciting. But I think 88 is exciting from that perspective because anyone, well, not anyone, but there's a lot of guys that could do really well in this division and win. So I think this is pretty exciting just because there's so many guys that can go pretty far in this division.
Yeah. Now, I would say 99 is also strong top heavy with the likes of Merigali and Kynan, but perhaps not as big a disruptor section as under 88. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a big drop off. Obviously, we've got a Cyborg, but he's getting up there in age. But to be fair, he did give Merigali a close match at Fight Pass earlier this year. But I do think there's a very big drop off in potential to win the division after Kynan and Merigali, but regardless, those are two massive names in the division, so looking forward to seeing both their matches and the presumed final that will be those two facing off.
Yeah, and then over 99, obviously the biggest hit was Gordon deciding not to do the division and do two super fights where he's got Felipe Pena and then Yuri Simoes. Felipe's still in the division and going for triple gold by all accounts, division, absolute, and the Gordon match, although I know you've got reservations as to whether a gold medal should be handed out for the winner of that match. But give us your thoughts on the over 99 situation.
Yeah, over 99's interesting. I think it's somewhat lacking in star power, but I think when you think about some of the guys that are coming up, it actually becomes quite interesting. Given some recent performances of guys like Luke Griffith, I'm really excited to see how he does, especially if he gets matched up against a veteran like Felipe Pena. I think this is definitely a division that he can win, just given what he recently did to Kynan. And then this division's interesting just because of size as well. Like any division that is like the cut-off and then there's no cut-off after that, you're going to have some big size discrepancies. So Big Dan, obviously, he's like a giant guy. Some huge guys in there, some guys that are not that big for the weight class, but very talented and big veterans. So, yeah, I think there'll be some interesting matches in this division for sure.
I think it'll be an interesting split in division. So you're going to have one side of the draw with Big Dan and Luke, and they'll meet second round if they both win their first round matches, being on the same team at New Wave. And then I would assume on the other side of the bracket it'll be Pena.
Yeah,
then
Benny will be seeded relatively high.
Could be on past accolades.
Yeah.
Although we've not seen like, loads of them recently. But I would favour... Well, it's interesting if, like... You would think there... Sorry, just before you jump in, if you think there, you would favour not being on the side of Luke and Big Dan maybe, but then they're going to meet early, so like your chances of running into one of them are, perhaps less. And then, yeah, Felipe still very, very seasoned and skilled. So like I'm not saying I would rather run into him. So it'll be an interesting bracket to see how it all shakes out. You were going to say what?
Yeah, no, I was just saying, like, got Roosevelt in there as well. I can't remember if he got bronze or just fourth, but, like, he made a decent run last time as well. He's been doing some stuff, so it's another name that could be potential for a high seeding or getting quite far. And then Mike Perez is an interesting one as well, just being a 77 guy, to be honest, in this division, so that should be interesting to see who he gets matched up against. Be interesting to see, obviously, winning a US trials, you would think he'd be seeded relatively high, especially in a division where there's been a bunch of replacements, but just being like pragmatic, is he going to be seeded a bit lower, just given the fact that he is quite a bit smaller than a lot of people in the division. That's yet to be seen, so that'll be interesting as well, I think.
Now, the female divisions, I think they're all tales of like more experienced grapplers and much younger upstarts, on the up. So like under 55, you've got like seasoned grapplers like Margot, A-Rod, and then you've got up-and-comers like Jasmine and Adele, obviously like Mayasa Bastos, Brenda, Larissa, Bianca Basilio, been around for a while, big names, Alex Enriquez, know him, but like probably like I would say not as known as them. So I just think there's a bit of a split in all the divisions, and then I was just using that first one to highlight it. It's going to be, can any of the young upstarts upset the old guard? So I think that's a good bracket of 8 grapplers. I think however it shakes out, we're going to get exciting matches on it. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I think there's pretty good star power in there, to be honest, and I'm looking forward to seeing some of the potential matchups, especially given that it's an 8-man bracket, and we're more likely to see some of the big stars in that division face off against each other.
And I think like under 65, same kind of situation. So you've got Anna Carolina, you've got Bia Mesquita, Amanda Levy, Mo Black. They're all really well known. And then you've got like younger people on coming through, like Aurelie Laverne, Helena Cravar. Don't know loads about Sulame Loventhal, but won the Asia trials, so we'll have to do a bit more research on her. And then Brianna St. Marie. So again, it's like you've got that split of like older to younger, but I think a good thing about these divisions is just having 8 grapplers means that like there is good name value, and it's not like people being added to fill out a division that are like lesser experienced or skilled. And I think like they've been able to concentrate a good group of grapplers there. So any thoughts on under 65?
Yeah, I think Helena's an interesting one. It almost feels like, obviously she's very young, but it feels like it's going to be a matter of time before she's like at the level to win ADCC, and does win ADCC. She is still very young, so we don't know if it's going to be this year or not, but I think it feels like anyway more of a matter of time sort of thing. And I think she's got the potential to be like a really big star for female grappling. Yeah,
and then over 65, I mean, talking about young grapplers coming through, I'd love to see Nia Blackman do it, coming from the UK. And then you've got older heads in there, like Kendall Rousing, obviously been around a long time, and a lot of people have seen her now commentating on the Flow Grappling events. You've got the usual Brazilian representation, so we've got Maria Rafato, Natalie De Jesus, and Rafaela Guedes. Will this be a division that Brazil doesn't win? That was a podcast that we did earlier. Like, how's it all going to shake out in terms of like Brazil v America? And then will there be anyone from the rest of the world get in there? But yeah, what do you think? Oh, I didn't even mention Amy Campbell, who is like the 2022 champion at over 60. So what do you think about that one, Calum?
Yeah, I like over 99 as well. In the men's, I think the size is going to play a big factor in this as well. We've got some of the girls in this division that are just over the weight and maybe don't want to make the cut to the weight division below them. We've got some of them that are just like naturally like very big for the division. So that's going to be quite a big factor. But yeah, we've got some really interesting matchups in this division. Looking forward to seeing Rafaela Guedes. I think she's really good at like shutting down people's games and getting wins in matches, and then Kendall as well with the wrestling. So yeah, looking forward to this division.
Okay, so to finish off this pod, we had a couple of questions come in to us through Instagram. First off, CJI versus ADCC. If you took all the grapplers at over 80 kilograms, who do you think would win?
If you're including Gordon. If you're not including Gordon, Kynan Merigali or Victor Hugo.
Okay. And then just, nobody asked, but under 80, what do you think?
Mika or Ratolos.
Okay. In CJI, what effect do you think that Ali will have? And will it favour any grappler in particular?
I guess to answer that, you'd probably have to watch some of the matches that have been on Karate Combat, but I've not really done that. I've not watched a lot of matches on there, so I can't really say. I imagine, given the coupling with the rule set, it will favour people that are going to push forward. I guess if you're going to get pushed back, like you're going to get pushed back against the wall, and if you're not going to engage, that's going to be a disadvantage to you. But again, with like the new rules and this new environment, I think we're only going to really tell on the day, to be honest. It's quite hard to envision, but that's my thoughts so far about that.
I think it should favour wrestlers in that the wrestlers are used to taking down opponents in open areas, so not against walls. So if you had it in a cage, you'd be likely to be wrestling up against a cage, and then cage wrestling is a different game to open wrestling. And then in ADCC, you've always got the issue on the mats of trying to keep the people on the mats and not fleeing. So you would think that like having that sort of lift behind you would encourage you to stay on the actual floor, and then you could still like take someone down against the alley wall. Although I don't know what the height of this one will be as regards to the one we've seen in Karate Combat, if it'll be any higher. So I'm with you though. Until we actually see it happen,
the interested to see if there's some creative uses of it,
like Craig Jones did in Karate Combat.
Yeah, I can imagine like or other Tolos finding some interesting ways to use it. So that might be quite fun to see.
Like, so Craig there did a triangle where he used the wall, reminiscent of sort of Anthony Pettis back in the day with his strike where he jumped off the cage wall first before landing it. So, yeah, be interesting to see what happens with it, but I can't really judge yet other than like what I've kind of seen in Karate Combat. And then CJI, will the New Wave guys ever get to do it? What do you think? Now, I say that first off, before you go, I have absolutely no idea whether like the New Wave guys have been told by anyone you can't do this, like by a coach or whomever, right? So it was just a question that came in. There's obviously no New Wave representation on CGI this time, so perhaps a fairer question is: do you ever see the New Wave guys doing the Craig Jones event?
Well, I think it depends how often they're going to do it. I think if it's like it stays how it is and it's like a once every 2 year thing and they're going to do it the same day as ADCC, maybe not. If they're doing it every year, I think it becomes more likely. And I think even if it was on the same day as ADCC, let's say for example we see Merigali double gold at ADCC and he's like up there with like Gordon as like one of the best guys, and he's obviously gotten a lot from that team. Even if they're specifically telling him like, no, we're not doing this event, are you really going to turn down like a likely $1 million just because your team? So maybe we'd see him turning away from the team. But I just think if it's going to become a more regular thing with like $1 million prize, and you're someone like Merigali, who I don't think is nearly as wealthy as Gordon, just given like how much money Gordon's made from instructionals and that much. I don't think Gordon needs the money as much, but like a guy like Merigali could potentially be a relatively easy $1 million if he gets to like a certain point, maybe similar par with Gordon. I feel like that would be quite difficult to turn down. You're getting much money and like you're the best in the world, and then there's this competition that's offering $1 million. It just seems like, why would you not do that? That just seems a bit silly.
I mean, our question is, will they get invited to do it?
Well, I think Craig has said that, like, on podcasts at least, they've asked, oh, would you let Gordon? Yeah, sure. I don't really care who comes to do it. We would happily have Gordon on it, so yeah.
Well, if Gordon's ever looking for $1 million, yeah. But, yeah, I think next year is interesting because there's no ADCC World Championship. It only happens every 2 years, so CJI has a chance to run unopposed, and then we'll see if anyone wants to jump in at that point.
Yeah, and I think ADCC is like the only competition like so far that has, every time it's on, gotten like everyone that everyone wants to watch competing like on the same day. in the same event. So if they could make that a yearly thing, that would be nice, rather than having to wait for that once every 2 years. Because I feel like it's the only thing that everyone kind of comes out and does, and you get to see everyone in the division that's the best guy in the division compete against each other. So if that could be like a once a year thing instead of once every 2 years, that would be pretty cool.
You would like the ADCC every year?
Yeah.
Okay, I wonder how, 2 points on that. I wonder how structurally it would work with the trials. And the other point I was going to make on it, just to, as we're reaching a conclusion, was that a lot of major sports events don't happen yearly. I quite like the ADCC only happening every 2 years, because I think it like builds some suspense, some drama between the events, and then we look more forward to it happening. But I know how much you like grappling, Calum, so I can totally understand your desire to see the best go at it every year.